Welcome to Lecture 3. This week, you'll learn about the relationship between reading, writing, and thinking critically. You'll also learn to formulate and strengthen an argument, which is an especially useful skill to have in today's world, as mastering the argument can help you in your personal, academic, and professional life. Are you ready to get started? Here we go. When you're presented with any sort of information, you have to think critically. If someone tells you something, you can't just immediately accept what you hear as being the truth. There are exceptions to this, of course. For example, if I said to you, I had oatmeal for breakfast, chances are I'm telling you the truth. It probably wouldn't do you any good to sit back and debate whether or not you believe I ate oatmeal for breakfast, because it's a trivial matter. On the contrary, if I told you the government is going to send each of us a check for $20,000, you're likely to question what I'm saying. If that were the truth, which would be pretty awesome, I'd have to show you evidence to prove that what I'm saying were in fact true. For example, if I said the Senate passed a bill yesterday that's really going to help college students out. Effective in 2009, full-time college students will receive a $20,000 check to cover tuition, housing, and personal expenses. You might actually believe me, especially if I told you where I read the information. Do you see how providing support or evidence makes our argument much stronger? Anytime you're writing a paper or reading another person's opinion about something, you should be thinking critically and questioning the person's material. Ask yourself questions like, what is the main idea? What conclusions are reached regarding the main idea? What reasons or evidence does the writer give to support the conclusions? And are the reasons or evidence fact or opinion? Questions like these will help steer your focus and allow you to make sure you're concentrating on the most important parts of the paper. These questions will also help you organize your own writing and make sure that you're staying on the right track and answering the proper questions. When you write an argument essay, you want your reader to agree with you, so you must try to convince your reader that your point is valid. This holds true in all instances, not just for writing papers. For example, if you were trying to convince your friend to come to Las Vegas with you for the weekend, you might say things like, "Come on, it'll be fun. We can blow off some steam and just have a good time. You need a vacation." You would say these things because they're convincing, and saying them to your friend might sway her to ditch her current plans and hop on the next flight to Vegas with you. You already learned about argument essays in your last composition course, but now you'll learn how to apply these skills to the research paper you'll be writing in this course. Because you're writing a research paper in this course, you may or may not be writing about a controversial issue. Nevertheless, you will spend the length of your essay convincing your reader that your thesis is true, and you will find evidence and support to back up your thesis. So keep in mind that you must present an argument in your research paper, an argument that you ultimately want your reader to agree with. This is easy to say, but less easy to do. When you want to convince someone that your way of viewing a specific point or issue is the correct way of viewing something, make sure you convince that person in the right way. Don't make an offensive statement about the opposing viewpoint. You don't want to isolate or anger your reader right off the bat. For example, if I were writing a paper about abortion, it would be a terrible mistake to begin my paper by saying, "Everyone knows that people who oppose abortion are backwards and uneducated." A statement like this would not only be offensive, it would make people automatically reject your argument. We went over tips on constructing an argument in your last composition course, but I think we should go through them again so they're fresh in your mind for your research paper. When presenting an argument, remember to use tactful and courteous language. You convince your reader by showing them that your argument is correct, not by telling them that what you are saying is true. This can be done by citing outside sources and thoroughly researching the opposing and supporting viewpoints of your argument. Next, make sure you point out common ground in an argument. Common ground is defined as an argument accepted by both sides in a dispute. For example, let's say that you're writing an argument about the new city park in town. The new park is located in a busy area, and you think the park should not allow dogs because of this. If you want to convince dog lovers to agree with you, you're going to have to include information they can't deny. You might write something like, "Although it's incredibly important to have dog parks in town, I don't think the new park should allow dogs. The new park is located on a busy street, right in the middle of downtown. Dogs are constantly running out into the road, and there can be tragic results. It would be much safer to have a dog park in an area where dogs can run off leash happily and not worry about cars. Do you see how I found common ground in the argument above? Nobody can deny that it's unsafe to have dogs running into the road. Think about how you can include common ground in your essay. Do you have any ideas so far? Be sure to acknowledge different points of view. If you fail to address the opposing side of the argument, you do a huge disservice to yourself and will lose points on your paper. Let's say you're writing a research paper about vaccinations, and your argument is that vaccinations should not be allowed for babies because they contribute to diseases like autism. For a paper like this, you can't just cite material that goes along with what you're saying. Instead, you have to make sure you address the other point of view. In this case, it might be wise to say something like, although vaccinations are recommended by many health organizations, including the American Health Association, recent studies have shown that there may be a direct correlation between vaccinations and autism, and that the long-term effects of vaccinations have not been studied long enough to ensure they are completely safe. Do you see how the opposing viewpoint is addressed in this argument? When acknowledging opposing viewpoints, sometimes it's necessary to admit that another viewpoint is strong or valid. This often strengthens your paper. You can't claim that every opposition but your own is ridiculous or an outright lie. Instead, you can admit the ways in which another viewpoint may be strong, but that your argument is in fact stronger. Lastly, don't be afraid to rebut different viewpoints. While it's not advised that you completely shut out the opposing viewpoints, don't spend the bulk of your paper praising the other side. Show evidence and support to back up your claims. Remember, you ultimately want your reader to see things your way, so you have to build credibility throughout your paper. How can you show evidence in your paper? As you learned earlier in this lecture, you can't simply tell someone something in a research paper and assume they will believe you simply because you told them so. In order to convince someone of something, use facts to prove what you're saying is true. For example, let's say you're writing an essay about the effects of global warming. If you write something like, "Everyone knows that global warming is ruining our planet," you aren't actually doing anything to prove your statement is correct. Instead, you have to find evidence from a credible source that states global warming is causing environmental devastation. You might say something like, according to an article published in the New York Times in 2004, scientists believe that global warming will result in mass extinction across the country. The article states, by 2050, scientists say if current warming trends continue, 15 to 37% of the 1,103 species they studied will be doomed. Do you see how I cited an article from a reputable news source, the New York Times, and even quoted the article to show that what I'm saying is actually fact, and not just my opinion? Providing specific information proves to your reader that what you're saying is true, and it also shows that I'm not receiving my information from a bogus source. The bottom line is that you have to show evidence, and lots of it, in a research paper. Knowing all of this, how will you organize the information in your research paper? Do you have enough information to support your thesis? Remember, even if you're writing about a relatively uncontroversial issue, you still have to address viewpoints that differ from your own, and make an effort to address any objections one might have to your argument. For example, say you're writing a research paper about puppy mills. Chances are that you're going to be hard-pressed to find someone out there who is a full-fledged supporter of puppy mills, and disagree with your claims that puppy mills are cruel and inhumane. However, if you're going to argue that the best way to avoid puppy mills is to adopt dogs from animal shelters instead of buying purebreds, you'll have to consider that some people might only want to buy a purebred dog. In order to find some common ground and still get your point across, you might say something like, if you want to purchase a specific breed of dog, there are ways to do it that are better than ordering from a puppy mill. You can search for rescue agencies for specific breeds, or you can get your dog from a local breeder. Buying locally will allow you to visit the breeder in person, so you can make sure your puppy is being raised in a healthy environment and that you aren't contributing to a vicious breeding cycle. Do you see how I addressed the other side, but was still able to come up with a solution that would appeal to all people? This is something you should strive for in your writing. By this point in the course, you should be well into your research paper. You should already have the thesis for your paper, and hopefully you've done some pre-writing about your topic so you have a development plan. No matter what your process is, make sure you stay on top of your writing so you don't put everything off until the last minute. Although it may be possible to cram out 5 pages of writing in a couple of hours, you will not produce an effective, well-researched paper with a strong argument if you're forced to crank it out 2 hours before it's due. Writing is a process, as you've already learned, and it's a process that can be quite enjoyable. Frantically typing whatever crosses your mind in an effort to hit the minimum page count for your assignment is hardly the most effective way to present an argument. Instead, give yourself time to work on your paper so you can take a break from your writing when necessary and reflect on the viewpoint you wish to portray. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you read something, you can imagine the writer saying the exact same thing to you in person? This is called a writer's voice, and learning to develop your voice in writing is a crucial part of the writing process. Think about your favorite author. Certainly he or she has a style of writing that appeals to you. Maybe you like the way they put words together and explain things on paper. For example, one of my favorite authors is Roald Dahl. When I read his stories, I imagine a funny, sharp older man reading the words aloud to me. I feel as if I understand his personality based on the characters in his story. Do you see how strong Roald Dahl's writing voice is? Finding your writing voice can be a tricky thing, but it is important to understand how you come off to your readers and how people absorb the information you relay their way. The only way to truly establish a voice in your writing is to write regularly and keep practicing. The more you approach writing as a natural process that is just like speaking, the more your voice will shine through. Don't force anything. Just be yourself. There are a few things you can do to strengthen your voice in writing. For starters, make sure what you write sounds like you. Don't use fancy words in an attempt to sound like a genius. People relate to writing that is understandable. Nobody wants to have to grab a dictionary every few minutes because a writer throws in unpronounceable or incomprehensible words. You should also reread what you write and edit it thoroughly to make sure you agree with your word choices. Lastly, be original in your writing. Don't try to recreate a classic. Expand upon your own thoughts and ideas, and you can create something entirely new for your reader. To learn more about finding your voice in writing, I recommend doing some online research. It may sound funny, but there are a ton of helpful websites out there that can provide you with the information you need to hone your voice and include it in all parts of your writing.